ready?
Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'd like to call to order the Okeechobee Utility Authority Board of Director regular meeting for April the 10th, 2018. Ask everybody to please stand and join me to the pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Done with that for the meeting. All right, we're going to determination of voting members. Ms. Anderson, she's not going to be here. No. Mr. Clay, here. Mr. Priestman's here. Mr. Fadley, Mr. Moldenhauer, here. Mr. Myers is out sick. Mr. Nelson,
here.
Mr. Tremaine. Here. We have a quorum. Agenda item number 2, the meeting minutes from March 13th, 2018.
Make a motion that we accept as written.
Motion by Mr. Clay, accept as written.
Second.
Second by Mr. Nelson. Any discussion on the minutes? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 3, the consent agenda.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Motion, Mr. Nelson, to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Second, Mr. Clay. Discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 9, CAS Governmental Services Presentation.
Mr. Chairman, you will have Craig A. Smith, CAS Governmental Services is here this morning to talk about the past legislative presentation, and they are here.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Jim Spratt with CAS Government Services. Connie Van Ash is here with me, and also our other partner in the back, Melita, who many of you probably already know. Thank you for having us here this morning. I've got to start by saying how much we have enjoyed and continue to enjoy working on your behalf in Tallahassee. It's not always the most fun because of the session and the process, not because of the client. We sincerely enjoy the opportunity to try to help out where we can. So I think to put this all in perspective, and we all know what's happening in November, pretty big wholesale change in an election. You're going to have a whole new cabinet in about 6 months. You're going to have new senators, new House members. We have a U.S. Senate race. For those of you who didn't see yesterday, the governor has thrown his name in the hat there. Be that as it may, we have to remember that that is always a backdrop to a session. In an election year, there's always funny things that happen that have no more explanation than an election coming up. Lay over the top of that when we started session, started committee meetings at the end of last year, the focus was on Hurricane Irma and its impact. And there was not going to be any money because whatever we were going to do was for Hurricane Irma. And then February 14th happened and put us into another tailspin. And I don't want to downplay in any way, shape, or form the tragic events of those days, of that day, and what the people in Parkland went through. But without a doubt, that took all of the oxygen out of the room for everything. And really create a pretty divisive environment, both from people coming to Tallahassee, but also amongst members in each chambers and amongst the chambers. Nevertheless, with all that as a backdrop, I think there are 2 things in particular worth highlighting. And we'll start with the good news first, which is OUA had an appropriations request in through what we call typical member projects in the Ag and Natural Resources budget. That appropriation request was for Treasure Island, and it was to the tune of about $3.5 million. I would tell you that when all the appropriation requests were in, there were 1.1 billion roughly in member project requests. Typically that list gets pared down to about $100 million. This year, before the veto, the final approved water project list was right at $30 million. When you account for vetoes, it was a little under $30 million. Having said that, while we did not secure $3.5 million, we still were able to secure for OUA 523,000 and some change. So not a holistic win, but certainly better than a kick in the backside, and that would not have been possible. Let me make it very clear, that would not have been possible without the help and the fighting of our delegation, who we've been truly blessed to have represent this county and this area for many years. And you know, Senator Grimsley and Representative Pigman have always said, what can we do to help? And we know that Senator Grimsley finished out her last term and is on to other things, and we look forward to the new senator that will be elected, and look forward to having the same working relationship. But that is a win when we look at how few projects got funded, even though we did not get the full amount. To get something shows there was some merit and a lot of hard work on behalf of OUA. I think the second issue, which is a much more disappointing and maybe a little more difficult to explain, is one of the challenges we've had, or OUA has had, is how do we get a hold of grant money to be able to do some projects that are a necessity here within the service area. One of the best programs out there that we have found is a small county wastewater program. One of the challenges is the way the program is set up. It limits you to a population area of 10,000 residents. Now, obviously, the way OUA was created, that doesn't work for us. So we had worked on some language. We worked with both Representative Payne, who's from Northwest Florida, Senator Brand is from St. Pete, Representative Edwards Walpole, who all of you know, Representative Katie Edwards. She had a utility bill. Anyhow, we worked through this process and came up with some language that would have opened the door for people like OUA or entities like OUA to be able to apply for that small wastewater program. Chambers of the House and the Senate. Make sure the lights don't go away on me here. They made it through both chambers. It was part of a bigger omnibus bill. I would tell you that within that bill, in its final form, there was some language that dealt with a credit system for utilities that are recharging water back into the aquifer, and there was some language that dealt with recyclable material and contaminations in that flow control stream. There was some issues on replacing docks. There was a Blue Star certification language for utilities. There was obviously the language that would have benefited OUA. That bill was vetoed by the governor on Friday. Very disappointing. Absolutely nothing to do with the language that would have helped us, but we're still in that same boat. You know, I guess if the boat starts taking on water and you sit on it, you go down with it too. For better or worse, and I would tell you there was a lot of misinformation out there, despite best attempts to right the ship. The headline in the Miami Herald the day after the bill passed, the legislature said it all when an article said raw sewage pumped into the aquifer. Even though there was nothing in the bill that dealt with that, there was nothing that changed what could be put into the aquifer or discharged into surface water. The other side grabbed the message and convinced folks that this was going to allow raw sewage to be pumped into the aquifer. And I think we all know that none of us would ever think that was a good idea, and none of us would ever have worked on a bill that would allow that. But as I say, nevertheless, that was the horse we were riding, and it made it through the process. And here at the very end, we can pontificate on what the actual reason was, but the realization is the bill came up short with the governor vetoing it, and so back to the drawing board to either rehash that language next year or come up with a different avenue to be able to allow the authority to get a hold of grant money necessary to do infrastructure. With that, I don't think I need to rehash kind of all of the ups and downs of the personalities that were in Tallahassee this year, and the fact that we again went past the 60-day session in order to get the budget done and everything else. I would like to stop and answer any questions, and once again to say thank you for having us here this morning.
Well, thank you, Jim. I personally don't have any questions. It is what it is. You know, we worked hard, and a lot of different groups, the city, the county, went up concertedly, and we just didn't win. We didn't get what we needed. So thank you for what you do, but we just didn't come out the other side where we wanted to be this year. Any questions from the board?
For those that are still going to be incumbent, is there anyone that you would recommend that over the summer we make some phone calls to?
That's, Mr. Nelson, that's a very good question. And I think, you know, a lot of this is looking to the crystal ball and making a best guesstimate. Obviously, we will have Representative Pigman back
Yeah.
for sure. I would tell you that, I mean, there's still time to qualify, but certainly all indications are that now current Representative Albritton, who has announced he is running to replace Senator Grimsley, I think, barring some unforeseen thing, he will be probably the most likely candidate or the front runner in that Senate race. And he has time and again demonstrated his understanding and advocacy for rural areas. And he has said, as the chairman of the Ag and Natural Resources Appropriations Committee in the House for multiple years, so he understands the budget, which is good for us.
Right.
And I encourage you, if you haven't met him, to do that. I think
Could you make an introduction?
we would be happy to. We can arrange a time for him to try to come over and make that either to the board or individually.
Well, I mean,
he's in this area.
Somebody taught me very well, who's sitting in the back room, is that if you want to get something done, if that gentleman comes, it would be very nice to make a little campaign contribution. Goes a long way.
I think that all of those things that are part of the political process are things we can talk about, and certainly be happy to talk to you after the meeting and see how we can arrange some introductions. The last point I wanted to make is, a lot hinges on how this governor's race goes. There is no doubt about it. A new governor's going to come in, and there's going to be a new approach to things, and that deals with everything. That deals with what are priorities for policy that you may have to implement or not implement as a board. It also deals with how we handle appropriations from the legislature. It also deals with grant programs or focus priorities. So this idea that there's going to be a whole new cabinet, I mean, I personally have my opinions, but that's not for this forum. The reality is, whether it be any of those individuals who have said, I am running for governor, whoever is victorious is going to have a different approach, have different people who focus the same thing, but maybe read the words on the paper differently, maybe interpret them or apply them differently. And so, I think the second thing that is important for each of us, for each of you, for those who are interested in what goes on in the state and with our elected officials is, if you have the opportunity to, or maybe you have already met the folks running for governor, running for commissioner of agriculture, running for those cabinet positions, introduce yourself. Get to know them. Maybe you already have a front runner in your mind. That's great, but make sure they understand the importance of what they do, and maybe even understand some of the frustrations you have seen as a board when it comes to dealing with a state agency or dealing with the legislative process. If we don't take the opportunity to tell them, then shame on us for not getting them started off on the right foot from our opinion. Is that helpful, sir?
Yes. Very much so. You want to chat after the meeting, don't you?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? We certainly thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Connie?
The handout that I passed out, those were, there were over 3,000 bills filed during the session. And these were, this printout is a listing of what we followed and monitored throughout the session that would have any effect on special districts, city, county, government. And there was an analysis that tells you what happened with that bill, whether it passed, died, got vetoed, or all of that. So that's what that is, at least. Provided.
Wonderful. Thank you, Connie.
And Mr. Chairman, as a last point, and I apologize for coming back up, but we enjoy talking to Mr. Hayford on a pretty regular basis on issues, but we remind each of the board members that we're happy. If y'all have a question after the fact or something in particular, please, and we work for you guys, call us. We will get an answer. We'll work through. John, if we need to, whatever we need to do, if there's something you want to know more about or something you have a question about, ask us and we'll take care of it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
you enjoy talking to Mr. Hayford? Did you go to UF too?
I did, yes,
That's
sir.
what I figured.
Yes. We're kind of on the same level in that way.
Okay.
That was the wrong answer for him.
I know I am.
All right, moving on down the agenda item number 10, Sawgrass Estates Water Main Improvement. Mr. John?
Mr. Chairman and board members, this is a project that has been before the board on a couple of occasions. It is a development out on the east side of town near the Agri Civic Center, just north of there. There is a proposal for 3 new cul-de-sacs, each cul-de-sac having 10 lots on each cul-de-sac for a total of 30 new lots. What we have worked in the past is a minimum requirement of a 6-inch water main to provide fire protection for the new proposed development, which will benefit obviously those 30 new lots as well as existing lots that are there on northeast 48th Avenue. From the standpoint of the OUA, we would like to look at upsizing that from a 6-inch to an 8-inch water main for future development. So to that end, you will see in your board, in the agenda item, that the cost difference between the 8-inch water main and the proposed 6-inch water main was roughly $5,400. The 3 cul-de-sacs would require a 2-inch water main down there to serve those 10 lots, and that has an installation price of nearly $42,000. So the question came to mind in earlier board meetings as to the cost share for the work on 48th Avenue, which was at least tentatively agreed to at a 50-50 split on that installation. Certainly with the OUA paying the difference of the upsizing from 6-inch to 8-inch. The question is, on the $42,000 for the 3 cul-de-sacs getting the 2-inch water main, as to whether or not that should result in a developer payment or a 50-50 split by between the developer and the OUA. Clearly, the other issue is that typically the developer paid the fees up front for that construction work, either directly to a contractor working for them, or in this case, whether or not OUA crews installed the water main, whether that money would be paid to us. In the attachments for the agenda, you will find a letter from Mr. Mark Goodbread, who is one of the folks behind the development of this property. You can see in there that he is willing to start out the proposal at a 50-50 split on the total construction price, both the 8-inch water main as well as the 2-inch water main extending to the 30 lots, with the understanding that there would not be a down payment, that there would be payments of 20%, I believe, per year over 5 years. So he is here to present his proposal for the development, and certainly from a staff perspective, where is the board's position on this, so we can either move forward with the development or go back to negotiating. Mark, if you
Mr. Goodbread?
step forward. This again, Mark Goodbread, representing the development.
Mark
Sawgrass
Goodbread,
Estate.
represent BMK.
Morning, sir.
Morning.
Good morning. I guess my job this morning is to try to explain to you why I think it's good for the OUA to cost share this project. And I would say there'd be 2 reasons. Number one, I think it's closer to where a lot of the development is going to come, or it's going to happen. I think a lot of things are going to happen on the east side of town for 2 reasons. Number one, it's closer to most of the jobs. And a lot of people that are going to commute back and forth to Okeechobee are not going to want to drive all the way in town. And number 2, and probably more importantly, is there's not really any traffic concurrency issues on the east side of town because DOT's already resolved them. So some of these projects that are in the middle of Okeechobee that were permitted and entitled back in the day, Mr. Conley, you've been in this game as long as I have. I mean, they're going to be tough to make them meet traffic concurrency. So, I mean, I would think any inventory or any infrastructure that you could put east of town would be more beneficial down the road for development. And number two, I think you're going to get 30 customers for $45,000. I don't know what the average monthly rate is for a service from OUA. I would think the payback period would probably be fairly quickly. And for a capital improvement investment, I don't know, it would be a year and a half or 2 years, I guess, would be the payback period, which would be
30 units?
yeah, it would be fairly quickly for a capital improvement.
Months.
4 years?
Yeah, I mean, it comes out to about, what, 48,000 to split the whole thing, doing the 54,000 on the 8-inch and then the 41 on the 2. What's an average, $40 a month for a water bill?
The bills start out, 40, it would probably be on the high end, but it could be that way. The base charge is roughly $20 a month plus consumption.
$1,200 a week.
But clearly understand this, the base charge is already factored into the cost of the OUA, running it, and the volumetric charge is for the production of the water.
Right.
So if those monies are moved somewhere else, then essentially they have to be made up by others.
Right.
And so, yes, the idea that we are going to get the potential for 30 new customers on the east side of town, there is advantages to that. The question is, that what we really look at from our perspective is this going to be applied towards future? Are we making a policy decision that we would, as staff, would know to apply to any future projects? It may be a one-time deal, clearly, or it can be a policy. So that's kind of where we're looking at from this perspective.
It goes to what we're doing in Basswood, Basswood's kind of following that mindset that people been doing 2-inch water mains, and we've been taking them up to a 6-inch going down those roads. And since we've had this meeting, I've had a lot of time to talk to people around town about growth. And I think the only way that you're going to continue to grow is in these small pieces like this. There's nothing coming in to stimulate this economy to where we can go out and get 24 million. You just heard we asked for 3.5 and we got 500,000. And I think that's what we're going to find throughout the environment right now, is everybody on the coast and everybody else is sucking up the money. But I think we have to take a hard look at how we're going to continue to grow our community a piece at a time. And it's 48, John, is that right? $48,000 if we split it down the middle?
That's very close to the number. Yes, sir. 48,000.
And then what was the payoff?
I think you want 20% per year, like 5 years.
5 years.
No down payment, 20% per year.
And hopefully in that 5 years he's got the house, and hopefully you're full in 5 years. I'm sure that would be his plan. None of us can predict how many houses he's going to sell, but he does have a good area over there. It also, with having the water main going, I can't think of the street there by South Florida Water Management. Isn't that?
I think that's 40th Avenue.
Yeah.
I don't know what the name what they go by.
But you work across through there by John Hammock's old house and the Laskys and on around Charlie Norris and all that bunch. There's quite a few homes when you get back in there. If you was to try to loop that, am I saying that correct? If we were trying to come from 40th over?
We could try to loop those two water mains at some point in time.
Yeah, you go back by the old Harvey home and everything back in there. So
Certainly the benefit is fire protection, as far as, 6-inch or larger for the fire hydrants. The downside of that is the lots are usually pretty large, so the density is not there. But if service were rendered, and certainly there's a difference of area. In Basswood, we know the groundwater is in poor shape there.
Very poor
and certainly there's a lot of benefit in Basswood. Yes, the 2-inch water main prices are shared with the property owners, and then we upsize it for future demand and fire protection. So we would do the same, those areas, providing that fire protection and the service, level of service, if they were so inclined to join in.
Now, didn't I understand that the 50-50 split, the developer was going to include that 8-inch increase?
Yes. The 8-inch
That's what I thought I
increase
heard.
and the 2-inch main was all
Okay.
factored into this $96,000 price tag, if you will, and then split two ways at 50, 48,000 and some change.
I have just one question. Mark, you could answer this on the developer agreement. When does the 5-year clock start upon execution of the contract or completion of the project?
I would assume at the execution of the contract. And I can assure you, if I could build them and sell them out in 4 or 5 years, it certainly would be done. I mean, my game is to get it done as fast as possible. And, that's kind of what I was stating in the letter. Really, it's been so long since we've done a project like this in Okeechobee. There's a lot of scattered lots and scattered development, but it's really kind of a mystery right now what the absorption rate is going to be and what the price point is going to be. And
Sure.
If the absorption rate is 18 months, then that's great. But, I went to an auction here last month where y'all auctioned off some property, and those people thought their absorption rate it was a rosy scenario. So I'm just trying to avoid me being back in the same position several years from now. I think that's a reasonable absorption rate, and I guess absorption rate's really dictated by price point. Mm-hmm. And we feel like for a half-acre lot, it's going to be a decent house, and of course we'll try to keep our price point in line so that our absorption rate meets our 5-year period.
And they're more marketable when you have infrastructure available, of course.
Say again?
Apparently, they're going to be more marketable if you have infrastructure available.
Correct.
And fire and
everything.
OUA service is an asset. I mean, if I was looking at 2 houses and one had a service from the OUA and one didn't, I would be inclined to choose the house that has service from OUA.
Well, I'm all about growth. I think we need it here. We really need jobs and growth, without a doubt.
So if it's the board's direction that we do this, certainly if there is a payment plan of 20% per year, you could look at a 20% down payment, and then every year thereafter for the 4 remaining years, a 20% payment. The other issue to consider is the method of payment. Certainly in developer agreements, we look at adding that on as an ad valorem tax, which gives us some priority status for getting the 20% payment. And then there can be a clause in there that if a preset number of lots are sold, the balance will be due on demand of reaching that goal. So there's things that if this is where the board wants to head, we would certainly, as staff, like to look forward to trying to implement that into any agreement.
So as a board, we could implement this project moving forward, and then we would open negotiations with the developer agreement at this point, right? So that would be our next step if we decided we wanted to move forward with this.
Certainly, if there are certain criteria that you would find as a board acceptable to move forward, what is that criteria? It gives both the developer as well as OUA staff to move forward to craft an agreement that we could then bring back to the board for discussion and or acceptance.
And, future policy is definitely a consideration here. We could include that in our board policy, that we do this on a case-by-case basis where we're not just setting policy, where we could evaluate each project.
Well, clearly, if that's established, if it's a case-by-case,
We could do that in our policy.
It gives me some guidance as to how I can move forward with this from some other unknown project that may come in. we'll go back to the fire hydrant issue. It was a clear-cut case that when the existing policy was modified, again, we know what we're supposed to do as staff and how to move forward with that.
So our policy could just be a boilerplate or a blueprint for future development down the
Be
road.
like some
However we set it up.
So to move forward, what do you need, Tom?
Need a motion?
All I need is the board agreement, and then John and I will work out the details on the developer's agreement.
What, I mean, do you want, out of the 20% payments, do you want one as a down payment, or will that be at the end of the first year? So it runs either 4 or 5 years. Do you want to do upon sale, like some absorption rate that they talked about, at 50% of lot sales that it's due on sale? Ad valorem taxes. I mean, I think we need to know all those.
Special assessment.
Right.
I don't think we should be setting a precedent to accept 100% of the risk of laying line for a new development. I just don't think that's something we should be doing. And I also don't know why we're paying for 2-inch lines to go to those individual lots. I mean, if we put in a water main, that's one thing, but I don't think we should be doing this.
Harry?
I understand your point, but how am I as a developer going to use your system if the infrastructure's not in?
Well, that's part of being a developer, is you provide the infrastructure for a development. I mean, that's not our job.
But the OUA is going to collect the royalty off of the...
Possibly, what you just referenced before about the auction. I mean, we thought we were going to collect a bunch of revenue there, and we didn't. And so this is going down that same road. We're putting the money out and not knowing if the development's going to work or not. And you're not putting anything out as far as right now. We're accepting 100% of the risk for our infrastructure, where normally developer puts that in.
I disagree. So my whole deal is we've went down this road of not do nothing.
But we've also went down the road of paying for it all and accepting the risk for it all, and that didn't work out either.
Yeah, when we did.
And we got sideways.
And we got sideways with it, and we're working our way out of it. But this is not a $22 million deal.
But it's the same road, though.
I think OUA's risk is mitigated because, the place is going to be worth way more than $45,000. It's going to be, I don't want you taking my property. That's why I'm trying to hedge against that. But if you do, you're going to make money on it.
We didn't lose
Okay,
money.
how does that work? Will we have a primary lien on the property
If you do the special assessments, yes, they're equal to county taxes.
and how would that work for selling the properties? If there's a lien, are the buyers going to be able to get mortgages on property that's
I would
got
assume
a...
there would be some kind of release clause, wouldn't there? And I could, let's say you laid the pipe on one road and there were 10 lots, and then buyer B comes to me and says, I want that lot and I want this house on that lot, and then I'll pay the lien off, and you release it, and then go to the bank and get financing with that.
So, John, there would be 30 liens.
No, sir. Because BMK or whomever would own most of those lots.
Well, what he's saying, though, is for him to sell a lot and get a release of lien, you would do a lien per lot. Take the...
If there was a non-payment issue, yes. But keep in mind, the way we have done this in the past, the special assessments were assessed on the taxes.
Mm-hmm.
If you either pay the tax bill or you don't, and if you don't, then a certificate is issued.
Right,
And
just
that's
like we
where
did.
we went into the issue of protecting our investment. We bought those certificates. And at certain times down the years, if it was multiple years, we were able to go through the foreclosure process to gain those properties. And so that's where we're at. Now, I will say this about that. There was some discussion here about absorption rates. I spoke with Mark about doing this, that if there is that issue, why don't we go as far as the first road only, 10 lots? And then let's see what happens to this absorption rate on just those 10 lots. So rather than being on the hook for 30, we're on the hook for 10.
Business decision you guys need to make.
Well, I mean, that's what was offered up. Now, that's the other end of the spectrum, that if there is this concern about what is the future, is this going to happen with the 4-laning of 70 and the bedroom community, the commuter, issue, is it going to happen? Well, let's just go forward with 10 lots. And if it works, great, then we can extend it the other 2. So there is that option out there. I would just allow the full board to consider that if 3 cul-de-sacs is taking the whole apple rather than just a bite of the apple, then let's just go to the first road and see what happens. And so rather than it's still an expensive project, but it's not $96,000 expensive. So again, it's wherever the developer wants to step up. I would suggest, certainly the consideration, that I do, my own personal belief, has some reservations that there is no investment by the developer on this. Under the current format, it's 100% by the OUA board with the first payment at the end of the year, 20%. It would be a little more palatable to me that at least if there was a 20% down payment, to use that adage, there's some skin in the game, it makes it a little easier to swallow. And if we only did the first road, there again, our exposure is somewhat limited.
Mr. Goodburn?
Yeah, I'm open to that. I mean, just so you know, and I know I don't have an investment with the OUA, but, I got $50,000 tied up in engineering and permits. So, and I know that's not have anything to do with you.
Again, that doesn't pay our bills.
That's right. Well, I'm not opposed at all to the 20% up front and then 20% a year effective upon execution of the documents, not at the completion of the agreement.
And then you go back and do the one street, whatever that 20% of that's going to be, is going to help him get started.
It certainly gets the cash flow coming in, as opposed to continually going out from the developer's perspective. And certainly from our perspective, I understand that I don't want to have this cash outlay and no return on it. I don't want that. But what I also don't want is a pipe in the ground and no users, because that really hurts from an operational standpoint. So it's really both issues. The cash outlay is certainly very important, but equally important is that we have customers, because if we have customers, we have usage. I don't have to go back and worry about flushing lines, and we are going to have the cost of reading meters every month, but that's what we do on the other 9,500 meters. We have to read them monthly. So again, it's just a cost of doing business.
Mr. Conley, if this board approves to move forward, have we given you enough to work with to negotiate the developer agreement?
The way I see this working, unless I'm totally in the dark, would be a blanket assessment on the whole parcel. One tax bill, unless it's property been platted. Yes. It's been platted. So there would still be, are you getting the number of tax bills, one for each lot?
I got the plat was recorded last month.
Okay, so it hasn't been broken into parcels yet. I still see a blanket assessment with the ability to break that assessment down on a per lot basis where you're talking about the same thing. Taxes don't get paid. You're just looking at multiple instead of a single one like I was envisioning to start with. Taxes don't get paid, we buy the certificate, just like we did previously. We may buy 30 certificates, we buy 2 certificates or whatever, but it's going to be up to the owner, taxpayer, to keep our lien current by the payment of the taxes.
And you look, there's 9 houses already built on the other side of the road, or 8 houses that you can see, which there's way more than that if you're going down that street. But
We just
That's
completed a
potential.
project and sold it called Towns of Okeechobee, and that's basically what we did at Towns of Okeechobee. We just, we just paid the, we owned it for 10 years, and we just paid the taxes.
And you got one tax bill.
Yeah.
Because now, I don't know.
And to that end, I would add that that particular development is one of the few that was signed and followed through on with construction. You know, the same folks that initiated that developer agreement are here starting this one. And whether that means much one way or another, it is a sign that out of the previous developer agreements that we signed, it's one of the few that actually happened, and there is vertical construction on the site, and it's moving forward.
Pretty good reference.
It's a track record that's
Yeah.
proven that should be pointed out.
Okay, have we given you enough if we decide to move forward with this to negotiate? It's that you guys are negotiating
Yes.
the agreement.
Yes.
I make a motion that we allow Mr. Hayford and Mr. Conley to negotiate with Sawgrass Estates
For an agreement to come back to be approved by the board.
on an agreement to come back and be approved by the board for the water main.
For Sawgrass Estate.
Motion by Mr. Clay.
Second.
Second. Mr. Nelson, now, just to clarify, this, they will be negotiating with you, Mr. Goodbread, or BMK LLC? You are BMK?
With the developer.
Just want to
With the
clear.
developer.
Developer, okay, that clarifies. Any discussion? Discussion. All in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Eric, you aye? Aye. It was 4-1. Motion to proceed. All right, agenda item number 11, OUA Main Office Historic Preservation Grant Application.
Mr. Chairman and board members, what you have before you, as you're well aware, there was 63 applications for this grant process. Rowe Architects, Inc. did submit the application. They filled out the application, submitted it. At some point in time in the fall, there was a telephone conference call where the review committee talked to each of the applicants, of which I was a part of that telephone call for the OUA, representing the OUA. Once the 60-some-odd applicants got through with the telephone interview, which I can't imagine sitting in on for 60-some-odd, but they did, we got ranked at number 12. It was a very good ranking. It was expected in years past with the funding that had been supplied by the legislature that we had a very good chance of being funded for the rehabilitation of the main office. As it turns out, the money did not come forth, and we're in that also ran category. I don't know how many of the ones before us will get funded, whether that'll be 2 or 6 or whatever, but it's not likely that we're going to get up to 12. So the question is, with the board looking at the office and the state, that we did make some nice temporary repairs from the storm damage. The building is old. The floor plan is such that there is some space in there that isn't utilized very much, or not wisely, could be used better. Old wiring. Do you want to go forward with another application process for this coming year for the historic grant preservation? If you did, it would require an investment. I think he has $4,320 for Rowe and Associates to move forward with another application, which they're taking applications right now, and I think it's through June 1st.
June 30th.
June 30th, sorry. June 30th that they're taking applications.
The storm, what you guys said about the storm, is that what sucked this money out to, you think?
The damage for us was a like a feeder band off of one of the, like a tropical storm that went through and it pulled that brick veneer?
No, I'm talking about
Why we didn't get the grant?
why we didn't get the grant. We're
Oh,
ranked 12th.
I don't know
Did they
what,
go to Turkeys or something up in
Dale,
South
did y'all think that that's part of it? Notice how Dale sits by the back door now?
Commissioner, no, I think, as I mentioned, the first part of the session was focused on hurricane.
Yeah.
Then Parkland happened, $400 million and a shorter revenue. All of the pots of money from FERDAP grants to historic
Everything.
preservation grants, all the pots shrank down. And that's all it was. It was a number. It wasn't a project, it's a number.
Right, it was
We fit into the
pulled the
number.
cash.
Yep.
The revenue streams was
Yes.
gone.
so again, the question is, it's still, the building is where it's at. We can look at, I mean, the temporary repairs are pretty nice. I mean, when you drive by it, it looks good. We did have money allocated in this year's budget to match up with the grant monies so that we could have refurbished and redone the entire building. Obviously, that's not happening this year. The question is, for the $4,300, do you want to chase it again for that opportunity to see if there are grant monies available in the next budget cycle?
This year, they don't have as much to do. The application's all ready. They just have to resubmit and
There will be some fine tuning, new numbers, as you might aware that another year has gone by, so they may want to go back and look at the construction money and what's allocated to pursue that. But there is, the bulk of the work has been done. From a staff perspective, OUA staff perspective, we will try to go out and get additional letters of support from local agencies to strengthen our application. But I have every belief that out of 60 some odd applications, if we were at 12, we have no control over what other applications may come in, but I would still think that we would have a very good showing next year.
so in summary, what this board needs to decide, if we want to spend $4,320 to Rowan Architects to file an application for this year.
That is correct, sir.
I make a motion that we try one more time with Rowe Architects at the cost of $4,320.
Motion by Mr. Clay.
Second.
Second by Mr. Nelson. Discussion? Further discussion? Being none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Cemetery Road wastewater treatment facility tree planting. Agenda number 12.
Mr. Chairman, board members, this is a revisit, if you will, from last month where we brought in a planting schedule and some trees, and there was a question as to whether or not we wanted to go with that many southern red cedars or whether there would be other variety of trees that could augment that windbreak. We looked at several different varieties and in discussions either through Sandhill Environmental Services, other landscape companies, or research. There is some other trees that we could augment or mix in with the cypress, with the southern red cedar, that being the Leyland cypress trees. This document was provided to the board members individually through email, asking whether or not the substitution of the cypress, some of the cypress for the cedar, as well as some additional trees for the western boundary, raising the total price to $23,729. From that independent polling of the board, there was a positive response, and we would just like now, as a public means of public discussion, to ratify that expense with Sandhill Environmental Services LLC in the amount of $23,729 to plant these trees in and around the residuals drying facility at Cemetery Road wastewater treatment plant facility.
John, how far back or setback are the trees? Am
By
I
the
missing
drawing,
that somewhere?
I think it was going to be roughly anywhere from 40 feet onward on the eastern side, and the northern side, it might be a little bit further than that. On the southern side, it's going to be considerably further until we build in the future a fourth bay. You can see it in the dashed line there. It is not there now. And on the western side, it's probably every bit of more than 100 feet. What we had to work against was we don't want the trees close enough that their shadow or shade would prevent the solar houses from working.
Yeah.
But we didn't want them so far away that the windbreak that they provide, it was so far away that the wind could come back down and get to the building. So that's the struggle that we were with, that we want them close, but not too close.
So you've engineered that with your UF degree?
Actually, better than that, it was provided through IFAS, which is an extension of UF.
Okay.
So there was a double whammy, if you will, both either with the benefit of IFAS in the documents they provided to us about vegetation and windbreak, as well as us, and then working with the landscape architects.
Yeah, they stand there till they blow down. I would imagine, what have they got, a 30-day guaranteed life, or 60, or what are they saying? They'll keep them alive for how long?
Well, in this instance, I think they provide, I don't know that they actually set a year, but the issue is, in this instance, we have a reclaimed water line right there that we use for plant water, so the irrigation is not going to be much of an issue. We'll automatically be able to irrigate them, and that's going to be the biggest concern up until about July timeframe. And then it's going to rain, and we're going to get very wet out there. But in the short term, it's going to be the irrigation.
Okay.
What's the board's pleasure?
This is what staff recommends.
Well, certainly from the standpoint of the emails, we obviously got positive responses, and we would like the board to move forward with this expense of the $23,729 and ratify, if you will, that work that said that we could move forward with it.
So said.
You like that?
That sounded good to me.
So you're putting that in the form of a motion? So said by Mr. Clay.
Second.
You second?
Yes, sir.
Second by Mr. Nelson. Discussion? You heard a discussion?
I had a question.
Hearing?
It seems like you said something about might be some mitigation funds available.
Yes, sir. There is let me back up. We have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage out there to these structures from the hurricane, panels being blown off. So we will seek funding from two different sources for that, both insurance as well as FEMA, to help pay for that. What FEMA does offer under another program is what they call the Hazard Grant Mitigation Program, which is if there is damage to a facility, they will pay additional monies if you go in to try to mitigate that damage from happening again. So for the trees, yes, sir, we are going to submit this expense under the hazard grant mitigation, and we hope to be reimbursed by FEMA since we are trying to provide this windbreak for the buildings, which is not there now. We're also doing a hazard grant mitigation request on some electrical damage that we have for some variable frequency drives. We're also going to be requesting that. So all of that is in the works, both with the insurance company and FEMA for the repayment of the damage, but we are going to chase that through the mitigation program. So there is a likelihood that this $23,000, a significant portion of that will be covered by this mitigation program. But we have to do the work to be able to pursue it.
Sure. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 13, surplus land sales.
I'll let Mr. Conley take this one, but you can see in your documents that parcel number 1 has closed, and the distribution of the funds. Parcel 3 will be hopefully closing soon, with parcel 2 shortly thereafter, depending upon board action.
On parcel 3, the first thing I'd like to present to the board and ask your approval would be an amendment to the contract. The amendment to the contract does two things. One, it extends the closing date, which originally was supposed to be a couple of weeks ago, to tomorrow. The second thing it does is provide for the buyer to select the closing agent, which we really don't care because the buyer's paying the expense on it anyhow. I would like to keep the table clean. I'd like the board to approve the execution of this first amendment to the real estate purchase contract with Los Potros on that parcel number 3.
Entertain a motion?
Let me carry that up further.
Oh, okay.
I'll tell you that it's already been executed by the buyer, and it's also been executed by Mr. Paul,
Auctioneer.
the seller. Anyhow, yes, the auctioneer. The only signature missing is that of the OUA.
So you need an amendment.
It's just an amendment, and it keeps things clean because it says instead of the seller selecting the title agent, the buyer will be allowed to select the title agent because the buyer's paying for it,
And we're moving it for one.
and changing the closing date to tomorrow. That's it.
And the motion would also then authorize the chairman to execute that document.
Yes, if you approve it, obviously you authorize the chairman to execute it.
So said.
Motion by Mr. Clay,
Second.
second by Mr. Nelson. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Secondly, in preparation for the closing that should take place tomorrow on, I'll call it the Nubbin Slough parcel, the LVA parcel. I've already seen all of the closing documents. I've approved them. And at the last meeting, you've already authorized the execution of those documents. So I have all of them ready to be executed here today in preparation for the closing tomorrow. And last, and whether John wants to address this or me, on parcel number 2, as you know, the static kept occurring after the sale took place, and there was no minimum bid that met the requirements that had previously been set by the OUA. Since then, a contract has been developed and presented, which does meet the minimum requirements for the Coker parcel 2. And it's up to the board whether to accept that or not accept that as presented. If you decide to sit on it and not sell that parcel, we would still be obligated to pay the auctioneer because a buyer's been produced that meets the minimum standard, the minimum bid that we set. So I leave it up to the board. Does the board want to accept the proposed contract or not? And let me say this. I just found out yesterday that OUA has a pipeline that's on a piece of the Coker property, so we will need to reserve an easement for the location of that pipeline, which is presently being done by Kenny Bro, as I understand it.
That is correct.
Just like we had to do on the Culberth sale, we had to reserve the easement because the pipeline runs down the middle
Right.
of that block. I don't have the legal description for where this pipeline is right now, but I would suggest if you accept the offer, we counter by saying, yes, we accept the offer, but we want to reserve the easement, the utility easement for the location of the water main on the Coker property.
So it's met our minimum, and the only thing that we have is just to deal with, first, if everybody agrees, but it has met our minimum, but that we need to go back to them and with a stipulation that we have to maintain ownership of the right-of-way.
Or the easement.
Or the easement. I mean,
Easement. I understand, John, you can tell them exactly where it is, but it goes from Heritage Village.
It comes out the north end of Heritage Village, turns and goes north up the western property line to Palm Creek?
Palm Creek.
Yeah.
Palm Creek.
Palm
Development.
Creek.
Whenever that was put in,
So it comes down that fence line?
it actually comes down the east side of that big wide ditch.
Okay.
So it's quite a bit ways inside the property.
Property.
100 feet or so.
Yeah.
But it comes across from Heritage, turns and goes north up to Palm Creek. Whenever Palm Creek was built, that's when this pipeline was put in. And
Should have been an
it was
easement.
during the day, yes, put it on my property, and there was never an easement recorded for it. So as long as we've owned it, or Mr. Coker owned it before us, because he's the one that allowed that, gave permission for that to happen, there was no need really for an easement. Now that it is leaving, being sold, we do need to record an easement for that pipeline.
One of the other issues that remained on that was the brokers. They needed to work out their arrangement as far as any commission or fee earned. I understand that's been done. Mr. Paul has signed that proposed offer that's come into OUA, as has the buyer. So the only change at this point would be the addition of the easement to be reserved.
And clearly, I can say this, as far as the availability of water and sewer has always been identified on that parcel. The exact placement of the water main may or may not have been known by any of the potential buyers. Again, I still feel that it's one of the selling points, of the property, that water is available. But we do need to give them that easement and give them that option as to whether or not the the pricing is favorable for them at the $982,083, our target sale price.
They develop it, we move, and they can do anything. We put the line anywhere.
I would imagine if it does get developed, it'll
Yeah.
be moved to meet
Yeah.
their needs, and we'll still be okay, and then we
Yeah.
can give them a quick claim deed back to the easement if we don't need it there on the new pipe.
Trade it on a new pipe or something.
Well, the only two issues that I know on that parcel of land are the drainage ditch, which is on the east side, it's on the west side, runs north and south. That's already there. We didn't create it. Cokers did it. The other thing, there's a little telephone substation thing in the northwest corner, right on the highway. But again, there's an outstanding easement for that. So those are things that are there. We had nothing to do with it. So it's take it or leave it as far as the buyer is concerned. I don't see those being valid title objections.
So you need a motion to accept the $982,083
It's really more than that, John.
and
If you got the contract, do you have it for?
You want the total buyer? Is that
Yeah, the total amount would be the,
the 105828?
$1,050,000.
Yeah.
okay, so the total buyer,
the total would be $1,050,828.81, with a net coming to the OUA of the $982,083. Coming to the seller. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I would just,
He was helping me.
go ahead, Eric.
And yes, I do have, thank you, John.
in the contract we had with Mr. Paul, do you recall what that penalty number was? Wasn't it 50,000?
1.5%.
How much?
1.5%.
1.5%?
And that buyer's premium is included in that $1 million number that we.
That was if they brought us a buyer and we refused to accept it. We still had to pay the auctioneer the 1.5%.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I thought it was.
Yes.
Well, amen. The board gave me direction of 95% of value and they meant it.
All right, so how do you want this worded, Tom?
You approve and authorize the execution of the real estate purchase agreement with Los Potros as buyer for the total purchase price of $1,050,828.81, payable according to the terms of the contract, on the condition that the OUA reserves an easement, a utility easement for the existing water main that's located on that property.
So sad.
Hope somebody recorded all that.
Motion by Mr. Clay.
Second.
Second by Mr. Nelson. Further discussion? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Guess we'll get notice to execute that, or to close on that one, won't we, sir?
Just want to take care of that right now.
Mr. Conley, do you need then a motion authorizing the execution of closing?
They've approved it, that's almost automatic, so we'll.
Fair enough.
Any further issue or anything discussion on the surplus land sales? We done with that?
I'm happy, I'm good.
I'm glad I don't have to go meet with them again, thank you. Agenda item number 14, public comment. Any public comment? They run for the door. Our two publics run for the door. Agenda item number 15, items from the attorney.
I think that's it. We got our check for the $185,000, right?
That is yes.
Okay.
You can see I got it.
You got nothing.
Nada.
At this point, I don't know that I've got anything to present to you.
Tom, I got one question, and I meant to try to find out. Have you heard anything from Harold on the?
No.
Okay.
If I have, I
That was
would
the
have
lawsuit
said so.
with 46th Avenue Villas.
We're talking about Rocky's Trailer Park.
Rocky's?
No.
All right, agenda item number 16, items from the executive director.
You just have in your board package several comments about the OUA pension. We've had a very good workshop for, if not all, almost all of our employees, individually from the administrator of the pension, explaining the process of how the OUA pension was set up and what it means to them, and it was well received by all of our employees. So it was a real positive event for them. We continue, as far as the pension, to work towards other goals, reviewing documents, and any of those will be brought back to the board for review. The community development block grant that's for Whispering Pines is out for bid right now. We will receive bids on April 12th. Those bids will be reviewed and tabulated by the engineer of record. And again, we have tentatively set April 24th, 8:30 a.m. here at the Chambers to conduct a special meeting of which you will get to review the bids and or make a recommendation of that, which will then go up to the state for final review, and hopefully then we can get a contractor started on the water main project right about the time the wet season gets on us. So that being said, I just wanted to remind you of the meeting coming up on the 24th, 8:30 a.m., and it would be primarily just to review the CDBG bids, recommendation, and whether we move forward with the project. I do have one other request that has come in since the board packages have gone out. As you're aware, it is political season. Somebody has asked about the possibility of political signs on OUA property. Signs in general, whether it's politics, race, creed, color, whatever the case may be, signs on the OUA property is not addressed in any of our policies. There is a personnel policy that talks about putting school affiliation, religious, or politics on your company truck. We do have that kind of provision, or prohibition, I should say. But there isn't really anyone that I've found as far as guidance from the OUA board about OUA-owned property. It is a slippery slope once we start down it, but I did want to ask the board whether there can be any direction for or against establishment of a policy of signs on OUA facilities or property.
Non-political.
Need to be neutral.
Yeah, we work for the ratepayers, and we sure don't endorse in any way, shape, or form, so we're ultimately,
As a
we're
group.
speaking for the ratepayers, absolutely no.
And it's fine.
You could put up a big sign that says, "Go vote."
Well, I mean, again,
Not rude.
it's just, you open the door and it gets flung wide open. But as far as having a policy established by this body, I have yet to uncover anything, and that's why I wanted to bring it to the board to see if y'all had guidance one way or another as to which way we needed to go with that.
Slippery slope was an
Tom, what you
understatement.
I was just going to ask what past practice has been. Have we allowed any signs?
No.
To my knowledge, we have never officially allowed signs to appear on our property for any venue other than if they filled out some paperwork to do a charity event, like on a piece of property, they put a sign on it that day. But otherwise, the only time, in my recollection, we tried to hang a historic centennial banner off the OUA building, and Mother Nature and the wind allowed that to stay up there for a little bit and then blew it down. So we haven't had much luck with signs on any of our
I think the thing is the political signs, trying to help out the community with bicentennials and stuff like that's fine, but the political thing just needs to be a straight up, no.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah, straight up, no way, no shape, no form. I didn't put my signs on your property, and I don't think anybody else should. I don't think that's right. On any county or city or state-owned property,
I agree with you.
you know.
Well, I'm pretty sure there are prohibitions on certainly the rights of way, for signs appearing. I don't know how the city or the county regulate that on commercial or.
Really,
private
you're not
property.
supposed to put them there.
Sir?
If you read your pamphlet when you sign in over there, you don't put them on any right-of-way. It has to be on private properties
So,
with permission.
okay, so from that standpoint, we can certainly pass on. From a political standpoint, the answer is a strong no way. Okay.
I can say it in a different way, but I don't think you want me to say that.
The rest of it down here said,
Would you like a motion to that effect to direct staff to put that in our policies?
I don't particularly need that, but if we need to, what I would suggest is the next time we do a rewrite on the overall
do it right now.
policies and procedures resolution, that we could add that in as a stipulation as far as political signs on property.
I make a motion that we allow no political signs on OUA property under no circumstances at any time.
That's
Strong
the answer to the
second.
question.
motion by Mr. Clay,
Second.
second by Mr. Nelson. Is that going to be that's a form of motion, not a policy change?
How do you want
We
it?
don't have a policy in place. We need to put a policy in place, or we can just enact
A
this now
motion
and work on a
Addendum
policy
to our
later.
policy.
Yeah, the motion for an addendum to our policy. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I know what you're trying to do.
In a second.
Yeah, that's what I gave it to.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I got to pay closer attention. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I got to listen real quick, I guess. Anything else, Mr. Hafer?
No, sir.
Any item?
Let me just
Yes,
ask,
sir.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you here.
No, sir.
Is the meeting for the 24th actually legally set? Did the board take action to set the special meeting on the 24th?
They did individually, so if we need to, we can do a motion today for that if you want, as a special meeting.
I think the board needs to set that. I think you did it by emails, if I'm not
That is
mistaken.
correct.
It was a while back.
So that needs to be formally done.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion that we have our special meeting on the 24th here at 8:30 in the morning for the Whispering Pines grant.
It's a special meeting. Yes, sir.
Special meeting, so. Anybody want to make that motion?
I make a motion that we have a special meeting on April 24th here at 8:30 a.m. to discuss Whispering Pines.
Motion, Mr. Clay.
Second.
Second, Mr. Nelson. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now we're legal. Okay. Anything else? No? Any items from the board? Just have one thing. We've got a few members that have never, and there's no reason for me to bring this up, except I know elections just happened in this board, but didn't attend the ethics class last year. I know it's not mandatory for our group. Is there another one coming up that we can certainly?
I would check on it. It
encourage
is,
people to
you
go?
are correct, it's not mandatory. It was an FYI type of deal, but I will check to see if there is one coming
Well,
up.
it's for everybody's benefit that doesn't understand sunshine, and would highly recommend if it's available to take it. Any other items from the board? Being done, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Nelson and Mr. Clay. See you on the 24th.
Amen.
Thank you, everybody.
Please send out